Afterward, the harassment didn't stop. More notices, anonymous letters, angry messages in the neighborhood group chat. But now, some neighbors had started defending me publicly, which only made her angrier. Then came her next move. She tried to buy the vacant lot next to my house, planning to turn it into community parking, which was really just another way to control things. I couldn't let that happen, so I acted fast and bought the lot myself. When she found out, she completely lost control, yelling at me in the street. I simply showed her the deed and smiled. Within a week, I had built a tall fence and installed motion-activated sprinklers. Her guests learned the hard way when they got blasted with freezing water at night. At that point, the neighborhood had changed. People weren't afraid anymore. They were amused. Memes started circulating. Jokes about Karen in a snorkel. Even her own gatherings lost their appeal. Still, she wasn't done. More complaints followed about my fence, my sprinklers, even the color of my mailbox. All dismissed. Eventually, she tried one last desperate move. Taking me to court, she accused me of disrupting community harmony and causing emotional distress. But her case fell apart instantly. I presented everything: bylaws, video footage, witness statements. The judge didn't hesitate. Case dismissed. Karen was warned about harassment and threatened with penalties if she continued. Walking out of court, neighbors who once avoided conflict were now openly supportive. But the best moment came later, when I got home, parked my Jeep, and sat on my porch watching the sunset. For a moment, it felt like peace. Though deep down, I knew people like her don't quit easily. She tried again. Flyers, late-night drive-bys, attempt to peek over the fence. But the cameras caught everything. The neighborhood, however, had already shifted. Fear had turned into laughter. People were living freely again. Then came the final twist. One night, police cars arrived. Karen stood outside, yelling, waving papers. But this time they weren't there for me. They handed her documents, escorted her to the cruiser, and drove away as the entire street watched. After months of complaints, she had been cited for misuse of emergency services and harassment. She lost her HOA authority and was legally barred from contacting me or anyone else she had targeted. The silence afterward was almost peaceful. Neighbors started coming by, thanking me. Kids asked to play basketball in my driveway. Greg shook my hand and told me things wouldn't have changed if I hadn't stood my ground. Then one day, a moving truck arrived. Karen left. No speech, no drama, just gone. We celebrated with a real party this time. Someone even brought a Jeep-shaped cake. People laughed, shared stories, and enjoyed being free from her control. That night, I parked my Jeep near her old driveway, raised a drink, and felt a kind of calm that only comes after long battle. Eventually, a new family moved in. Kids playing outside, neighbors waving. Everything felt lighter. Looking back, it all started with something small, just a Jeep and a refusal to back down. Sometimes, the smallest stand can lead to the biggest change. So let me ask you, where would you have drawn the line? Have you ever dealt with someone like Karen? When things spiral into chaos, who really decides what's right? I'd love to hear your thoughts. At exactly 4 a.m, at that strange hour when even raccoons have finally called a night, I was jolted awake. Not by an alarm, not by some lingering nightmare, but by an aggressive, relentless pounding on my front door. It was so loud and sharp that I'm convinced half the neighborhood woke up with me. My heart was racing as I rushed to the window, trying to make sense of what was happening. And there she was. Karen. Yes, that Karen. The self-declared ruler of the HOA, standing under the streetlight like she was on a red carpet, dressed as if she had somewhere far more glamorous to be, flanked by 2 guests who looked completely out of place in our quiet street. She was screaming, face flushed, demanding that I move my Jeep out of my own driveway because, according to her very important guests needed the spot. I was still trying to process the absurdity of it when suddenly red and blue lights lit up the street. Karen had actually called 911 over parking spot at 4 a.m. My house was glowing like a crime scene. I threw on a jacket, opened the door slightly, and immediately got hit with a wave of her overpowering perfume and an even stronger blast of her voice, accusing me as if I committed some major offense. She started yelling about violating emergency hospitality codes, waving her finger in my face, claiming the HOA gave her authority to reassign parking whenever she saw fit, and calling me selfish. Right then, a cop stepped out his cruiser, looking like he had absolutely no patience left for the night. He asked if the Jeep was mine, and I confirmed it. He gave me a look that practically said he already knew the situation was ridiculous. Meanwhile, Karen kept going, throwing around HOA jargon, dropping names, trying to make it sound official. Her guests looked like they were regretting every decision that led them here. By now, neighbors were starting to peek out, some in bathrobes, some recording on their phones, others watching quietly from behind their blinds. It had turned into a full-blown spectacle. Karen insisted my driveway was basically community property. The officer pinched the bridge of his nose and calmly explained that private driveways weren't a police matter. She reacted like he had just betrayed her personally, gasping dramatically and declaring she would escalate this to the highest level of HOA authority. Then she stormed off with her guests as the police cruiser pulled away. When I shut my door, I expected to feel relief, but instead there was this tight knot of dread sitting in my chest. I knew this wasn't over. This was never just about a Jeep. By sunrise, the whole street was buzzing. Neighbors were asking if she really called the police over my car. Some laughed it off. Others warned me quietly. Karen didn't forget things like this. She held on to grudges like trophies. And sure enough, within hours, rumors started spreading about an emergency HOA meeting regarding my ongoing disturbances. I just shook my head, poured myself a cup of coffee, and pulled out the old, worn-out binder of HOA bylaws. After flipping through it carefully, it became obvious. Karen was clinging to some vague rule about shared parking areas, but the language clearly stated that private driveways were not included. I highlighted the relevant sections, took photos, and prepared myself. That evening, the clubhouse was packed. Karen stood at the front with her bored allies, all wearing smug expressions like they'd already won. She launched into a speech about community values and hospitality, painting me as the selfish villain disrupting harmony. When it was finally my turn to speak, I calmly asked everyone to take a step back and look at the actual rules. I laid the binder on the table, opened to the correct page, and read the bylaw word for word, making sure everyone could see the highlighted sections. Karen tried to interrupt, raising her voice, but then something unexpected happened. Greg, a neighbor I barely knew, stood up and said she had done the same thing to him, over his own driveway. The entire room shifted. Suddenly, this wasn't just about me anymore. One by one, others started speaking up. Complaints about ridiculous rules, petty enforcement over things like wind chimes, mailbox colors, and trash cans being left out too long. Karen tried to regain control, but the mood had changed completely. Finally, the board president banged the gavel and made it official. No violation. Case closed. Driveways were private property. Karen stormed out, muttering about appeals. It would have been funny if it wasn't so draining. I went home, parked my Jeep in the driveway like it was a symbol of victory, and for a brief moment, I felt proud. But deep down, I knew she wasn't finished. And I was right. The very next morning, a bright orange violation notice was taped to my door, claiming my Jeep had been parked too long. A rule that didn't even exist. I checked twice to be sure. The following day, another notice appeared, this time about tire marks on the driveway. I almost laughed. Her plan was obvious. Bury me in endless complaints until I gave in. Instead, I decided to fight back differently. I installed high-definition cameras all around my property. That first night, I caught her on video creeping around with a flashlight, inspecting the edges of my yard. The moment she noticed the camera's red light, she quickly retreated. I saved the footage, labeled it Karen Midnight Patrol, and waited. Soon enough, she hosted a party, a gathering of HOA elites. As expected, she directed her guests to use my driveway again. But this time I was ready. Earlier that day, I had installed steel bollards at the entrance. The first guest tried to pull in, saw the barrier, and had to reverse awkwardly, causing a backup in the street. Chaos followed. Cars blocked driveways, mailboxes, even hydrants. Tow trucks arrived. Guests started complaining as their expensive cars were being hauled away. Karen stormed over, demanding I remove the posts, but I calmly pointed to the cameras, the bylaws, and reminded the board had already ruled. The party fell apart in real time. At one point, she tried to charge up my porch but slipped on the curb, and the entire crowd burst into laughter. Just like that, her authority cracked.